So it's wintertime here in the northern hemisphere, and many people are starting to put their boats up for the season, and some people will choose to put their boat up on the hard to try and protect it from those winter weather conditions. But sometimes, as we know in boating, things don't always go as planned, just like some of the things we'll see in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week don't go as planned as well. Our first story to make the boating news this week is probably going to be one of the most daring rescue attempts we've seen this year. It's going to take us to New York and up on the Niagara River, where this past week, around noon on Wednesday, authorities received a call stating that a car was seen floating down the Niagara River toward the Niagara Falls. Witnesses told police they believed there was a person inside the vehicle. When authorities arrived on the scene, they showed up to find the car nearly fully submerged with the trunk open. The vehicle had become hung up on the rocks just a mere 50 yards short of going over the Niagara Falls. Authorities quickly realized due to the location of the vehicle, their swift water team was not going to be able to make the recovery, and the Coast Guard was contacted to bring a helicopter in to attempt an air recovery of the person they believed to be inside the vehicle. Unfortunately though, this is a sad situation. When the rescue swimmer did reach the vehicle and was finally able to get the door of the car open, he did find a female inside the car, but unfortunately she was unresponsive. They were able to recover the body of the female, but I will edit that part out of this video out of respect to the family of the victim. This incident is still under investigation as to why this vehicle wound up in the river, but under the last reports from authorities, they are believing this vehicle was intentionally driven into the Niagara River. The car did remain lodged on the rocks for 4 days after this incident while authorities tried to figure out the best way to remove the car from the river, but on the 5th day, the car actually freed itself and went over the falls. Even though unfortunately this had a terrible outcome, this still probably was one of the most daring rescue attempts I've seen this year. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Portsmouth, Rhode Island, where this past Friday morning around 10:30 a.m., emergency crews responded to an emergency call at Hinckley Yachts on Little Harbor Landing. According to authorities, crews were doing repairs on a 100-foot motor yacht at the marina when all of a sudden a loud explosion was heard and a blaze broke out. Fortunately, the crews who were doing the repairs on the yacht were able to evacuate the vessel without any loss of life. Unfortunately, one person did go to the hospital with burn injuries. When emergency crews arrived, they found the 100-foot motor yacht fully engulfed in flames, but also the fire had quickly spread to a 100-foot sailing yacht right next to the motor yacht. The local fire chief mentioned that 8 municipalities were called to assist in the blaze. They had crews that were working on the exterior lines that had to be on SCBA air at the time because it was so smoky. That limited their ability to work as they had to rotate crews on and off those lines, making it more difficult to get the blaze under control. Crews worked throughout the entire evening to make sure to get the blaze extinguished. Unfortunately, after the blaze was put out, both vessels were determined to be total losses. There's not been an exact cause of the fire determined at this time, and the total damage hasn't been determined either, but we're told by the fire chief that both vessels were each worth several $1,000,000. Our next story is a little bit of a strange one, especially following last week's boating news where we featured a Russian cargo ship where the crew had been detained due to possible negligence on the water due to intoxication. Now I saw the comments, you guys weren't very surprised by a Russian ship being detained for being intoxicated, but this happened again this week, except not a Russian vessel this time. This time we actually had a British cargo ship collide with a Danish cargo barge overnight in a heavy fog. Unfortunately, there were 2 crew members on the barge at the time. The barge wound up capsizing, one of the crew members is currently missing, and unfortunately the second crew member's body was found inside the barge. Danish authorities said there was fog at the time of the accident, but they also said that it was not dense and those conditions were not unusual for this time of year. While they do believe it may have been a contributing factor to the accident, they don't believe it was the actual cause. Swedish authorities said during their preliminary investigation they believe there are several suspected crimes that occurred during this incident, one being marine intoxication, which I just found odd after our incident just last week, the others being gross negligence in maritime traffic and causing death through negligence as well. 2 crew members who were aboard the Scott carrier, the British ship that was involved in the incident, have been taken into custody by Swedish authorities, but they've refused to give any further details at this time due to the preliminary nature of their investigation. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Hudson, Florida, where this past week 2 boaters got exceptionally lucky when a group of fishermen decided to take a path a little less traveled. 2 people had departed the river on a 30-foot dock barge delivering pilings to a job site when all of a sudden the weather turned and they could not find their way back into the river, and unfortunately their vessel wound up running out of fuel and they wound up at the mercy of the wind and sea. Wind and currents wound up pushing this crew almost 40 miles offshore into the Gulf of Mexico, where fortunately they got stuck in a marshy area before being pushed further offshore. This crew gets really lucky though. A group of fishermen who've never traversed these islands winds up deciding to do a scouting trip and winds up finding this pair. When the fishermen found the couple, they were dehydrated and had been on the island for 2 days. They were also a little cut up from oyster beds around the island as they'd been circling the island trying to find help. The fishermen went ahead and made the call for help, and the US Coast Guard, the FWC, and the Pasco County Sheriff's Office all responded, and the couple was brought back to shore without any major injuries. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out on your waterways, be sure to hit me up on Facebook or Instagram and let me know when you might see your stories over here. Just like Juan Alvarez, Stephen Davis, Just Another Guy, Kurt Angle, and Eric Pullen did this week. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here.